Well, ladies and gentlemen, I must say that the news today and the news that I'm going to cover is actually really hard for me to cover. And if you watched my video yesterday around the massacres that occurred in Australia, I thank you. It was actually a very difficult video to make, and it was a very graphic video. So if you've watched it, kudos to you. Now, before we get on to the video of today, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. And sometimes these videos are very difficult to make, just emotionally more than anything else. So let's get on to the video of today. And really, there is a lot that we can cover and learn from the Australian massacres, and I really want to focus on that. So as you'll know, if you watched that video, there was a mass shooting at a public Hanukkah by the Sea event in Bodie Beach in Sydney. Now, this was widely described as a targeted anti-Semitic terror attack, and it was very interesting to note some of the comments in my video around, well, they deserve it, because that was originally the first response many people had. Somehow they deserved it. In fact, Hamas said they deserve it. In fact, you can watch that right here.
إنما جرى في سيدني إنما يعكس حجم الكراهية التي أثارها الاحتلال الصهيوني في كل مكان على هذه البقعة من الأرض في الغرب والشرق. هناك ردود فعل عنيفة جدا لما جرى من إبادة جماعية في قطاع غزة. أنا على المستوى الشخصي أحمل نتنياهو مسؤولية هذه الأعمال التي تجري في أي مكان وتثير الكراهية، لأن ما جرى في غزة ولد شعورا عنيفا لدى العرب والمسلمين وحتى غير المسلمين. هذا العمل هو عمل جاء في أجواء من الإبادة الجماعية التي يشهدها قطاع غزة، ولا زال آثار هذه الإبادة مستمرة، وبالتالي علينا أن نتوقع مثل هذه الأعمال في أي مكان في العالم.
Now, the casualties have been reported as 11 killed and dozens injured, and that was according to Fox News. But The Guardian reported 15 killed and 40 plus wounded. So we don't actually know what the casualty count is as of yet. Now, the attackers have been identified as a father aged 50 and a son aged 24. The son was born in Australia, but the father was an immigrant. Now, the father was killed at the scene, but the son is critically injured and has been hospitalized under police guard. And again, I saw some blood libels in the comment section that these were actually IDF officers and they'd both been given amnesty. Well, that's all just hogwash. Now, the weapons used were reportedly a bolt-action rifle and a shotgun, and we're going to get back to the weapons and the response to that. Now, ABC reported that the ISIS, or the Islamic State flag, had been found in the attackers' cars, and that the cars themselves had apparently been booby-trapped with explosives. Now, one attacker had actually been investigated by the anti-terrorist units in Australia in 2019, but they were deemed not to be an immediate threat, and so they were allowed to continue. Now, a bystander, Ahmed, tackled the attacker, was shot and has survived surgery, and has widely been praised as a hero who stopped the casualties amounting even higher. Now, the news is he may lose his arm, but we can't yet confirm. Over $1 million Australian dollars has been raised in a fundraiser for him so far. Now, the victims were all prominent Jewish community members, including a Chabad member and one husband who was killed while shielding his wife from the attack. Now, the attack has deeply traumatized that specific community and reignited Holocaust-era fears, with this attack being paralleled as a second October 7th. Now, it's important to understand that there has been a surge in anti-Semitic incidences in Australia. For those of you who don't know just how anti-Semitic Australia has become, I'm actually going to give you the crib sheet of anti-Semitic attacks that have occurred in Australia, and you can judge for yourself. So let's use October 8th, one day after October 7th, where hundreds gathered at Sydney's Opera House to chant "Gas the Jews," December 2023. Multiple bomb threats were made at several synagogues across Australia. 25th of May 2024, Australia's largest Jewish school was graffitied with hate speech in Melbourne. 13th of October 2024, anti-Semitic graffiti sprayed on a Jewish bakery in Sydney, with threats to harm the owner. October 17th, 2024, front door of the Bodhi Brewery was torched after being mistaken for a Jewish-owned kosher deli. October 20th, 2024, a kosher restaurant called the Lewis Continental Kitchen was torched in an arson attack. The 21st of November 2024, cars were set on fire and buildings vandalized in a prominent Jewish neighborhood in Sydney. The 6th of December 2024, a synagogue was torched in Melbourne in an arson attack. The 7th of January 2025, a man threatened worshippers at a Chabad North Shore synagogue in Sydney. The 10th of January 2025, the synagogue of Sydney was vandalized with swastikas. The 11th of January 2025, attempted arson and vandalism on the Newtown Synagogue in Sydney. 21st of January 2025, Jewish Childcare Centre in Sydney was set on fire and vandalized. 12th of February 2025, 2 nurses in Sydney Hospital were suspended after proudly declaring on TikTok that they would murder their Jewish patients. 4th of July 2025, people attending a Shabbat dinner at the East Melbourne Synagogue are targeted with an arson attack. The 14th of December 2025, gunmen opened fire in Hanukkah celebration, killing 15, including 1 child, and injuring over 40. You don't hear about these, but these are all facts. So to sit there and suggest that this was an isolated once-off event is incorrect. Now, the PM of Australia, Albany, suggests that this rise in anti-Semitism is targeted and ideologically motivated. They say that it is very different from the random shootings that they've seen in the past, such as Port Arthur. Now, the reason for this is because Australia has a large amount of mass migration, and the mass migration is changing the demographics of the country, and specifically the ideology of those that are imported. Now, there was a point in time where everybody just assumed that if you import large amounts of individuals from abroad, that they will assimilate. And what we are finding is that they are not assimilating. So the Australian government issued an emergency national cabinet, they convened it, and they had a bright spark idea on how to address the issues that they are now experiencing in Australia. And that is, they're going to tighten gun laws nationally. They're going to limit the number of firearms per person. They're going to review the duration that you can have a firearm, and they're going to fast-track a national firearms register. Then they're going to push forward all this legislation at the fastest way possible, and they are going to implement stricter renewal controls. So yes, it's going to be tightened gun security, gun controls. That's how we're going to stop this. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly why the West is incapable of dealing with the issue. The issue is not gun control. You cannot suddenly suggest, well, if we tighten gun laws, the anti-Semitic incidences which we are seeing will somehow cease to be. I've just highlighted to you just how many of these there are. There are tons. It is a serious issue. It is caused by mass migration. It is caused by mass migration from the third world, specifically from Islamic nations. This is the equivalent, as Babylon B jokes, it's the equivalent of saying, we know how to stop this violence. Let's ban Hanukkah. If we ban Hanukkah, can't have a Hanukkah attack, can you? It's stupid. But you see, these governments all have these problems, and they will continue to spiral because they do not understand what the crux of the matter is and what is causing the issue.
And when we come to the West trying to warn the governments and intelligence agencies about what is happening, about the people we fled from, we have this new political correctness agenda that tells us, oh, we're the racists, we're the ones who are traitors, and the extremists needs to be understood and embraced, and, you know, they have a point, let's listen to them. And sooner or later, they're in parliament, they're in government, and there you go in America, you have Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib changing the narrative in Washington that is now affecting the whole, influencing and affecting the narrative around the world, attacking Jews, attacking Christians, and this is just the beginning. So if Christians don't wake up, Christian leaders don't wake up, then we Muslims who fled from extremists can't help you anymore.
We Muslims who escape from extremism can't help you anymore. They're telling you what the DNA is.
Now, Jewish leaders are criticizing the intelligence and the security gaps. Many individuals have said, why did it take the police so long to respond? Reports are it took the police 20 minutes to arrive. But I don't think that that was a failing of the state, so per se. The state is not used to mass shootings. The officers don't commonly have firearms on them. So the reality is when this occurred, you need to get a firearms unit. There probably aren't that many that are trained in being able to do this. And the delay at responding would have been obvious because this is a state where individuals don't have a lot of experience with firearms, nor mass shootings. Now, the reality is these shootings will become greater. I've just highlighted to you how many attacks were arson, throwing firebombs, trying to set things on fire, stabbing individuals. Gun control will not help you. What will help you is empowering civilians to act in a capacity of self-defense. Civilians should be at all times the first responder. You cannot rely on others to save your life. Gun control is not the answer. Now, there have been calls in Australia for tighter anti-Semitic legislation to stop anti-Semitism and stronger visa screening. Well, visa screening, because we know where the issue is coming from, is coming from abroad. Now, the consequences for universities and institutions tolerating anti-Semitism must also be considered, because what we are finding all across the West and in South Africa is that universities are becoming breeding grounds for intolerance and anti-Semitism. Now, the government has not formally responded to these recommendations at this point in time, and they're probably not going to. But in any case, there must be a parallel debate about balancing anti-Semitism and the importation of Islamics from regions who are not typically inclined to be tolerant of Jews. This is a debate that cannot be avoided. Now, Donald Trump has urged American Jews to celebrate Hanukkah proudly and not to live in fear, because he understands that this attack was designed to spread fear. Netanyahu has claimed that the recognition of a Palestinian state has fueled anti-Semitism, but the Prime Minister of Australia, Albanese, has rejected this, citing that there is still broad support for a two-state solution. But as we saw from the Chief Rabbi of South Africa yesterday in his address, if this was about a Palestinian state would have been formed numerous times. There's been over 3 to 4 opportunities for a Palestinian state to be formed. This is not about a Palestinian state. It is about globalizing the Intifada and spreading Islam globally. Until anybody actually gets the kahunas to say that, you will not fix this issue. Now, we can see that because a day after the incident occurred in Amsterdam, Hanukkah celebrations were disrupted by violent anti-Israel extremists, which police had to intervene in. In fact, you can watch that right here. And in the very next day, after the massacres occurred in Australia, a white liberal woman who thought that they were going to virtue signal and get their 2 minutes of fame interrupted a vigil in Australia for the murder victims. In fact, you can watch that right here.
Move. Keep moving to the side. Move. Women, stay. Wait there. Hold up, boys. Hold it. Take a step back, guys. Take a step back. Why? Why you do it? Why? We are grieving. Why?
We are grieving.
We are grieving. No, it's because of you. It's happening. We are grieving. Why you do that? Why? Slow down a bit, Lucy. Good work, guys. Thank you to the police. Thank you, police.
Now, in response to this, Albanese attempted to get some rabbis in Australia together and try to do a prayer meeting so that he could get a photo opportunity standing in solidarity with the Jewish community. And in response, the rabbis told him to futsak. Now, we've seen something very similar in the UK, where a Labour minister went to a Hanukkah vigil and was booed because these leaders only want a photo op. They only want to say, look how we stand with these minorities. But they don't. What they are attempting to do is to bribe voters into supporting them by galvanizing support for their niche area of interest. And in this case, it's the Gaza Wall or Palestine. Now, we see this in a place like South Africa, because as we've seen in South Africa with the RCC case, well, South Africa is all about the justice of the Palestinians, even while South Africa burns. Now, where we can see this most recently is that a meeting of the Hague Group, self-purported Hague Group, met in Cape Town and framed Israel's actions in Gaza, in the Gaza war, as part of a global impunity, with Palestinian activists arguing that Gaza was nothing more than a rehearsal for oppression everywhere, because now, according to them, Israel is a threat to the whole world. They're going to repress everyone. I mean, this is stupid. One of the smallest nations on the planet is just going to, globalize the Intifada. Oh, wait, no, that's you guys. In any case, the Islamist Dango condemned the Sydney attack, but warned against that attack being used to delegitimize the Palestinian cause. But this highlights the global disconnect between abstract global rhetoric, with all these individuals saying, oh, free Palestine, and the real world Jewish deaths and the consequences of the rhetoric that they use. And for South Africa, the lesson should be, many individuals look at Australia as a safe bet. Australia is the second most popular destination for South Africans to immigrate to. The first is the United Kingdom. And all these countries have issues, ethical and moral issues, that they are struggling to deal with these issues at some point in time likely to impact everyone unless hard decisions are made. And none of these countries are demonstrating that they have the will or the moral fortitude to make the hard decisions. In any case, that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. And until tomorrow, bye.